So LA is burning right now. I'm currently living in LA. Not right in the thick of the danger. There's a few different fires that are burning, some of which have been kind of contained and controlled, others which have not been controlled at all. The area that I was in was not an imminent danger, but enough so for me to get out of the area to somewhere a little bit further away. So I think the house that I live in will still be there when I return tomorrow. We'll find out. These fires could keep going. They could go out on their own. They could be, brought under control by the people doing that work. But LA cut its fire department, and along with other social services, it also voted on a referendum to keep essentially indentured servitude of prisoners legal, which is used in situations like this. They literally have prisoners for little to no pay at all fighting these fires. Prisoners, people who are not free, and I believe they can opt in or out usually of actually being out in the field, but the incentive there, especially if it can affect their sentence positively, they're incentivized to go put themselves on the front lines of a fire without any particular training other than whatever they give them for these prison programs. So that's the kind of labor that LA is relying on for this. And don't get me wrong, there's tons of people out there doing great work, and they do seem to be kind of controlling the fires, at least the stuff that's a little bit closer to LA. The fires that are going out towards the coast and Santa Monica are raging pretty strong. A lot of people are losing houses, having to leave. There's been a few deaths so far. It's pretty bad. It's gnarly. It's traveling because of the wind. So we have this combined problem of the fires, which are raging very strong, and the wind pushing the embers to different places. So you have different fires popping up in different places. The climate for LA is already welcoming to this kind of thing anyway, because it's dry and sometimes it doesn't rain for a long time. So there are, fire seasons that happen, so to speak. But this is definitely tearing through the residential areas a lot more than usually is the case, especially in the Santa Monica and Palisades area. So I'm praying for everybody there. I'm hoping people got out. And I'm trying to put together my thoughts on this as a broader issue. I mean, for anybody who's sort of aware of the climate crisis and the sort of tipping point that our climate is at anyway, this isn't really that surprising. And what we're seeing is a gradual increasing of climate disasters of different kinds over time. And this is what scientists have been warning about for a long time. Not only would there be a lot of sort of catastrophic things happening, but they would happen gradually more and more, and in ways that our infrastructure isn't built for. And you definitely see that in LA, not just with these fires, but anytime it rains or things like that. I mean, it's raining more in LA than it ever has before, which in some ways is a good thing. Right now it's not raining, but LA's not built for rain. And it's also not built for these fires. And you can see how things kind of start to fall apart, and they sort of have a handle on the situation. But, when certain areas that need water for putting out the fires don't have access to that water, they don't have enough firefighters. Some of these sort of infrastructural issues start to make themselves known. And thankfully, LA, for the most part, is a place where there's enough people that you can find the help that you need. But it lays bare just how important it is to have infrastructure in place for this kind of thing, not just infrastructure for fighting fires, but for getting people out of where they are safely, being able to set up places that people can go and have food and get to where they're going, so that when you issue an evacuation order, people are able to go somewhere and not just put themselves into more danger by leaving their homes with nowhere safer to go. And so these are the kind of problems that you start to be dealing with when you have natural disasters happening, like hurricanes, like wildfires, or, intense blizzards. And all of these things are what is going to happen as a result of the climate destabilization. And so this infrastructure for not just getting people out of where they are and having, like shelters set up, but also the infrastructure that tracks these kinds of things and, those types of uses of data, satellites, that kind of thing. I mean, that's what saves our asses when this kind of shit happens. And we do have some infrastructure there, some solid infrastructure, but it's not hard to see how the whole thing could become destabilized if a problem were to become bad enough. I mean, the way these fires are spreading sort of through the Palisades up through the kind of North Hollywood area, it doesn't seem inevitable that this will happen, but it's not hard to imagine a scenario where, all of these fires combine together and become something monstrous, And there are certain conditions of certain areas that make it so that they catch on fire like this easily. And it's not like the people in those areas don't know that that's part of the risk of being there. But it doesn't change the fact that these situations can change so rapidly and in ways that move so fast. And, these are things that, as advanced as we are and as advanced as our technology is getting, we don't really have the power to combat these type of natural disasters. I mean, these fires breaking out almost completely overpower the people who are trying to put the fires out, and they try to contain it. They do the best they can to keep it from spreading. But I mean, this fire out in the Palisades, it's been going for a couple days at this point, and I think it's still at 0% containment. So what I see our sort of entertainment technology increasing hand over fist, increasing exponentially in a way that in some ways improves our quality of life, in some ways it doesn't. But we're seeing this increase. And then meanwhile, our infrastructure for actually fighting the real world problems that are in part being caused by this technology and the extreme use of energy that it requires, that infrastructure is falling apart. And we did see some investment by the Biden administration in different kinds of infrastructure for natural disasters, infrastructure in general, highways, and a little bit of modernization of our infrastructure. Most politicians talk about it. Biden was able to do some things, not a ton, to push us in the right direction, but we're way behind is what it comes down to. We are not up for what we're up against here. And if we're thinking about out-competing the likes of China, going into the future, we're not going to be able to do that if China is so far ahead of us in acknowledging the nature of this problem. And the nature of this problem is that our climate becomes more destabilized the more we partake in these extreme uses of energy, which are required by fossil fuels and by technology like AI, among other types of technology. But AI is quickly becoming one of the most pollutant technologies on Earth, and one of the most wasteful in terms of resources like water, which becomes pretty important when the coast that a lot of these data centers are built on, is on fire. We need that water, and we don't necessarily need infinite iterations of image generation that people can do all kinds of weird, pointless, questionable things with. That hasn't really provided much of a use case for itself yet. The only use case for it seems to be selling the idea of implementing AI at companies. That seems to be the only function of AI, is to infiltrate different sectors of the economy and sort of pretend to do that work. But it doesn't really seem to be very good at doing that work. But what we know it is good at is using energy and emitting carbon that is contributing to this destabilization of the planet. And so I think we all got to take a page out of the book of Greta Thunberg, who, in her climate activism, kind of followed that through, has been following that through to its logical conclusion, which is general anti-capitalism, general anti-imperialism, in recognizing that all of these things are related and connected. And while it seems silly to say there's fires happening in LA, that's why we need to overthrow capitalism, that's why this is capitalism that's doing this, that seems like such a cliche to say. But when you really analyze the forces that are causing this destabilization, you see how true that is. And then you also connect that with the other thing that Greta Thunberg is applying a lot of her time to now, which is Gaza and American and Israeli imperialism worldwide. And this is important for us to recognize that we're at a time where almost nothing is as much of a threat to climate and world stability as U.S. imperialism, along with Chinese imperialism, Russian imperialism. Imperialism in general is part of this enormous acceleration of our climate instability. You know, building bombs, building all these facilities where these things are made. That's another big part of the carbon emission that happens, all the jets that are required, not to mention actually blowing up these bombs, obliterating entire parts of the world, wiping them off the map. It's not hard to look at Gaza and look at the images coming out of Palisades of neighborhoods that are wiped out by this fire and see that there's similarities there in terms of what we're looking at. We're looking at total devastation. And I'm drawing that comparison for a specific reason, which is that I think while these are different scenarios, in one case you have these uncontrollable fires, in the other case you have bombs being deliberately dropped on Gaza and obliterating everything in sight. But the similarity is that America is going to be seeing a lot more of those type of images going forward. There's going to be no shortage of them coming out of Gaza and other places, frankly. Trump is already talking about accelerating his imperialist hunger to Greenland and Canada, and all of that's probably just a distraction or just bullshit. But either way, I think it lays bare that Trump mostly cares about imperialism and knows that that's probably the only way to get America's economy back to a place where it is any semblance of healthy, is to take on very profitable and productive territories and fold them in, which is nonsensical. Obviously, that's not going to happen. But the point is that if Trump is sending the military out into the streets, if he's sending the military to Denmark to annex Greenland, but specifically the kind of things that we're going to see in America, floods, more fires, more types of disaster scenarios that we can't even really predict or imagine, we are seeing what the response to that is going to look like, which in the case of Trump is going to be choosy and selfish and politicized. And like the reaction to these fires, it's probably going to be relatively broken as well, if not completely broken. And so I've been saying for a while that I think a lot of what we're seeing in Gaza, the propaganda that's used to normalize those type of images, to normalize the subjugation of those people there, those same techniques are going to be used in America to normalize the subjugation of illegal immigrants and legal immigrants in their mass deportations, if those go through. But, I mean, things look pretty apocalyptic in Los Angeles right now. And if you extrapolate what Trump wants to do with the military when it comes to mass deportations, etc., you know, I think that looks pretty similar to what we're seeing in Gaza in terms of the way people are being treated, not in terms of entire cities being bombed. But who needs entire cities being bombed when you have wildfires and hurricanes doing it for you? And I do think we're seeing a microcosm of how all of that can spiral when you have a bad fire season and you have a president about to take power who is actively at odds with Gavin Newsom and is almost certainly going to politicize any aid to California the moment he takes office, as well as any other state. We're not in a good position to handle the combination of these type of events that could happen going forward. And so I just want people to be ready for that. Be aware of what the disaster infrastructure in your area is, how to navigate that, how you can help with it, how you can participate in it. If there need to be evacuation shelters near you, what are the type of disasters that are possible near you? You know, if tornadoes, hurricanes are possible to happen in your area, chances are good that in the next few years, it will. At least a small version of it, if not an intense version of it. So I think we need to be aware of that going forward, and be aware of the fact that the Trump administration is not poised to curb the behaviors of any of the entities that are causing this. And that's the America that we live in. It's entirely possible that if things get truly disastrous, that will force the administration, any administration, to make some major changes to the capitalist status quo in America. But we can't rely on that. It's entirely possible that Trump would let the entire country burn to the ground just to get what he wants. And we have to be prepared for that.